The next thing we're going to do with lines is to find the slope when we're given standard form. And so this is different because we've been doing slope-intercept and point slope, and just to remind you, the codes that I use, the abbreviations, are SI and PS. We've already been doing those, and so now we're going to check off standard form also. But recall that standard form doesn't tell us much directly about the graphical nature of the line, so we need to do this. Okay, we need to convert it. Step number one, we need to convert to slope-intercept, and just a reminder, that means we're solving for y. And then once we have slope-intercept, we can easily extract the slope. Okay, so we're going to jump right into some examples here. There's not a lot of new material to learn about with this. So let me zoom in. Okay, so here we have some lines in standard form. Maybe I should just remind everybody, standard form is AX plus BY equals C. And these are capital A, B, and C, and these are just this is a constant, of course. That's a constant, and then these are just coefficients here. There's a coefficient on x and a coefficient on y, and they're on one side of the equation, and the constant is by itself. That's how we know we're in standard form. So here's some standard form, like right here. So 2x minus y equals 1. So in this case, the a is 2, the b is negative 1, because there's a 1 right there. It's just imaginary. And then there's a c, which is 1. Okay, so if we're going to solve this for y, then the first thing we need to do is get all the other stuff. Think of this as like a literal equation, right? So we're going to subtract 2x and subtract 2x. Those go away, and we're left with negative y equals negative 2x plus 1. And remember that I like to shove this part in before the constant, just because we're used to mx plus b. We're used to it in that order, so I like to have the x stuff first. There's no mathematical advantage to that. It just helps you see it when you're in slope-intercept. And so then we're just going to go through and flip all the signs here, because we want to get rid of this negative y. So either divide by negative 1 or multiply by negative 1, or go through and flip all the signs. However you want to think about it, it all means the same thing. So that becomes a positive, this becomes a positive, and that becomes a negative. So here's our slope-intercept form, and so we can easily see that the m is now 2, because there's the m right there. Okay. What about this? So what about here? We're going to subtract an x, so those go away, so we're left with 2y, and we're left with a minus x minus 8. And again, I'm just putting the x in here first. I'm just putting it right in there first, because I like having the x first. And I need to just divide by 2 and divide by 2 on all this. So we have y equals negative 1/2 x minus 4. There's my slope-intercept form, and so my m is negative 1/2. And notice that I really, for this term right here, it's negative x over 2, but I just rewrote it as negative 1/2 x, just to get the coefficient out there, because that turns out to be the slope that I want. Okay. Okay. So we'll subtract 8x. We'll get 3y and negative 8x and minus 9. Dividing through by 3. So we have y equals negative 8/3 x minus 3. So there's my slope-intercept. So obviously the m is negative 8/3. Okay. What about here? So we subtract 4x. We get negative 3y is negative 4x plus 9. Dividing by minus 3. And so those go away, and so we have negative divided by negative is positive 4/3. x, and then this is going to give me a minus 3. Okay, so there's my slope-intercept. So my m is positive 4/3. Here, I'm going to subtract an x, subtract an x. So we're left with a negative y equals a negative x minus 2. And so we just go through and flip all the signs now, and we get that. And so that's that. Of course, the coefficient on the x is 1, so our m is just 1. There's a 1 right there, so it's just 1. Okay, what about, let's see. I hope you're seeing this is just quite easy. Okay, let's do like this one. 3x plus 2y equals 6, so we're going to get rid of the 3x. We're left with a 2y. That goes in first. Now we're dividing by the 2. So we're having a y and a negative 3/2 x and a plus 3. So our m is negative 3/2. What about y equals negative 1? Well, that's already in slope-intercept form. Y equals negative 1 is just this line right here. It's just going across where y equals negative 1, right? So the slope is 0, because this is actually 0x minus 1. That's what that is saying, is y equals 0x minus 1. So the m is 0. Okay. Now, if you have something like this, don't be concerned like, oh, I don't know what this is because I don't know what it looks like. It looks weird. All this is here is that instead of having a positive 10 over here, they just moved it over. So this is literally, if I just add 10 to both sides, I'm going to have this, and now it's in standard form. Of course, I can rearrange this if I really want to, if you need to be convinced that I can just commute these two terms right here. I just can commute those two and get that, and now I have the x first and the y. It really doesn't matter at all which way you do it. And so if we subtract a negative 2x, then you have a negative 2y and a minus 2x and a plus 10. And then if you divide, I'm kind of running out of space here. I wasn't going to do this next problem anyway. Let me just get rid of it. Like that. Okay. Bet you wish you could do that on a math test, huh? Get rid of a problem you don't know. Okay, so we're just dividing by negative 2, and we get a y. That gives me a positive 1x, and this gives me minus 5. So my m is 1 because it's right there. It's a 1. And we'll do one more. Then I guess this one, again, I've given you this one in an incorrect order, but it really doesn't matter. All we want is we want the y on one side of the equal sign. So I can just add 30. And actually there's another one I'm going to do after this one, so I lied. This is not going to be my last one. So if we add 30, we get a 10y equals negative 2x plus 30. And again, I just noticed I'm now putting the 30 at the end because I want the x first, and the x is already there. So if I divide by 10, divide everything by 10, I get negative 1/5 x and a plus 3. So of course m is negative 1/5. Last one I'm going to do is this one right here, actually, and I want to do this one, number 18, because the y is already over here on one side of the equal sign. So all I have to do to strip off this negative 5 is just divide by minus 5. Divide everything by minus 5, and so those are going to go away, and I have y over here, and I have a negative 1 divided by a negative 5, so this is just going to be a positive 1/5 x, and negative 5 divided by negative 15 divided by negative 5 is a positive 3, and that becomes a positive, so this is going to give me positive 3 and a positive 1/5 x and a positive y. And I already have this in slope-intercept form because here's mx and here's b, and here's y. And notice all I've got a constant, I've got an x, and then I've got the y by itself. So my m here is 1/5. And if it helps you to take this and then rearrange it and say, okay, but this is y equals 1/5 x plus 3. If it helps you to just use the symmetric property and flip the whole thing around like this, it's fine. I don't care because the m is there one way or the other.